So now that we've had a chance to practice parameters, the next thing that we're going to do is practice return values, because that's another independent characteristics of functions. They can either return something or not. Up until now, they have not been returning anything. So here's an example of a function declaration that would return something. Notice this time, instead of using the word void, it starts with the data type of the value to be returned. This is what that definition might look like. We're going to have that same data type of the value to be returned along with the function name, but this time inside of the function definition we're going to use the keyword return, and then we're going to return either a variable or a value of the same data type. And this is what a function call might look like. If my function is attempting to return something to me, it's a really good idea to capture the return value in a variable of that same data type. So here are an example of some calls that we might make. The first one is I have a variable called string name. Obviously getName is returning to me a string value. The same with the char answer and the float price. We always want to capture the return value in a variable of the same data type that is being returned. So here's an example of a function declaration that not only has return data types, but it also has parameters as well. So we have the keyword, the data type, which will be whatever the data type is that's being returned, along with a comma-separated list of parameters. Here's what that definition would look like. Once again, we're going to use the data type of the return value, and we're going to use the keyword return to return either a variable or a literal of that data type. And then of course we want to capture the returning value while simultaneously passing arguments to it. So these are what those example calls might look like. We're going to calculate the age, and so I'm going to pass to it a date of birth and a date, and we're going to calculate the age in the function and return an int value, and I'm going to capture it in an int variable. The second one is we're going to pass it some kind of a name, and it's going to return a char that I'm going to put in initial or init. So at this point I want to mention the difference between a parameter and an argument. So sometimes you're going to hear them used interchangeably, and my apologies if I use them interchangeably, but they are technically very different. So the parameters are in the declaration and the definition. This is the comma-separated list of values or variables that I expect my user to send to me. So when I am creating or defining a function, I get to decide what parameters or what values they're going to have to pass to me for my function to be able to work correctly. Arguments, on the other hand, are the values that are being sent to the function. For instance, in my example calls, calculate age, we are going to be passing two arguments. We're going to be passing a date of birth and a date. In our function middle init, we're going to be passing the argument that is a string full name. So they may be used interchangeably, but they are very, very different. So parameters are the values that are in the declaration and or the definition, which the creator of the function has decided these are the values that I need the user to pass to me. The arguments are the values that are being passed in the function call. All right, now we're going to see that we can also set default values in our parameter list. So this is an example of a declaration, and I have two comma-separated parameters. One is an integer and one is a char, but notice that they are both set or defaulted to something, which means that if the function is called with no parameters whatsoever, these default values will be used. So this is an example of what that definition might look like. Notice in the definition itself, if I am doing a declaration and a separate definition, we don't need to default those values. We would list them in the declaration, not the definition. But if we don't have a declaration, then I am because we put in the definition above main so that it has been defined above main. Then I would definitely have to set those default values in it. And here's an example of the function call. Notice on the first one, no arguments. So if I don't pass any arguments to it, it's going to automatically use the default values that are defined in the declaration, or I could pass one or more argument to it. If I only pass one argument, which one of the default values do you think it's going to use? And if you said the default value for y, you're absolutely correct. If I only pass one argument to it, it's going to assume that that is the first parameter, and then the second parameter that doesn't exist in the call would automatically be the default value that is set. All right, so how about if we write some functions that implement return values?